It is 6 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the work session for the City of Minnetrista City Council, January 8th, 2024. How many of you have made that mistake yet? So far, I haven't. So we only have one item on the agenda. It's a discussion of the personnel policy, or we're going to review it. So first off, I'll just say who's here. I'm Lisa Whalen. I'm the mayor. Council members present: Kathleen Refkin, Ann McGregor, Peter Vickery, Claudia Lacey. And then staff that's present is a Director of Public Works, Gary Peters. Ali Polfus is a Director of Administration. Our City Clerk is Ann Meyerhoff. Jasper Krugel, our Administrator. Brian Grimm, Finance Director. And then also Chief Paul Falls with Public Safety. With that, I'll hand it over to...
Sure.
You? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Whalen. What we have today on the work session is just an item that Councilmember Refkin requested that's on the agenda. Councilmember McGregor kind of seconded that to discuss the personnel policy. So I'll give a little background. Since I've been here, the last 2 years, we've updated the personnel policy a couple different times. I think the language and the sections that we're talking about, Allie did a little research. I think those are last updated in 2019. We saw, so it's been in there for a while. The language itself is based on the League of Minnesota Cities personnel policy template, and what they use is the EEOC fact sheet on bathroom access stuff. So I'll just put that out there. I'll leave it to Councilmember Refkin to kind of kick it off and talk about it. If we do want to make changes to this, I kind of outlined the process.
Well, before, absolutely. But before we do that, there's certain things that have to be in there here by state statute. And so those can't be eliminated or be gone. The other thing I want to say is we want to be very, very careful that we don't want to come off as being prejudiced or to a certain category of individuals. We represent everybody in our community, whether they're doesn't matter what race or religion or ethnic, no matter who they are. So I wanted to say we want to be careful about that and be considerate of that as well. So with that, I will edit.
I will say I agree with everything you said. Okay. Specifically, my main concern with the first one, which names and pronouns, which I brought up with Jasper at the end of last year, is that we deal with the public, and the public deserves to have consistency with who they deal with. And I'm going to use Jasper as my example because he let me. Our residents know him as Jasper, and if tomorrow he decides to go by Jennifer, okay, fine. But then in 3 weeks, let's say he's angered several residents and decides to go back to being Jasper. The residents don't know who they're talking with or what is going on. Right. Also, in my mind, there's the legal question of who's signing paperwork. If you're talking to Jennifer on the phone and then something is signed by Jasper legally, how is that appropriate for the public? So I personally do not care what people want to be called, but I think when you are dealing with the public and we sign documents that hold up, that are legal, that represent our city, the name that you use should be your legal name. If you want to go through the steps and change your name, then everyone will call you whatever your new name is. Mm-hmm. But we deal with the public, and I don't think it's appropriate that you can change it on a whim and then change it back on a whim and change it to something else.
So when you say their legal name, so let's say we have several Roberts or Michaels. Their legal name is Robert J. Smith, but they go by Bob. So it's not different. Their legal name is Robert, but they go by Bob. Or there's a legal name they go by Jennifer, but they go by Jen. So I don't think that it's a problem if somebody says my legal name is Jennifer Smith, but I go by Jen, and that's what he or she always refers to themselves as. I don't know that should be a problem, and it doesn't matter whether you're transgender or whether you're gay or whether you're straight or whether you're, no matter what. I think consistency is always has a value to it, and so whether you're transgender or not, or whether you're gay or not, I think we can always require them just to be consistent.
I hear what you're saying, and you say you're addressing the first part of it. Every employee will be addressed by a name. and none of us really cares what that name is, except when they come in and they actually apply for the job, that they use their legal name, that kind of thing. But the pronoun that corresponds to the employee's gender identity, what Kathleen's talking about, the switching back and forth or possibility, I think that wording just needs to be, a few words need to be added to that, that's all.
How many people that have a gender, how do you say, how many people go back and forth?
I don't know. I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, my professional experience and working in some of the nonprofits, this has been something that's been coming for quite a while, and I think maybe out where we live, there's not so much going on, but the people that do change their pronouns or change the gender, that's a big decision, and they don't do that lightly. They're supposed to be like coming out or something. There's a lot of decision in that, and so I don't think this is going to be a problem. People going back and forth on this. I think if it happens, it's going to be minuscule. Maybe once or something.
If even then, my experience is the same. People that change their gender identity change it, and that's what they are going forward.
Well, I'll just be the fly in the ointment. So they, it's like, I actually see the opposite. I see a lot of people come in to where I volunteer, and these might just be kids, and it might be a fun thing to do, but we had an instance on the 7th where a mother came in with one of her children and referred to her by her name, and said they both wanted to volunteer. But when she was in the shop a week prior, I was informed, because there's a sign, we have one dressing room, and there was some discussion over gender. And so I think it's a slippery slope when we keep saying it's not going to be important and it's not going to happen, but we do all this language to change things. And when you were saying Robert goes by Bob, that makes sense. But what if Robert wants to be Roberta?
What if?
Well, that's confusing. If
Why?
you sign Roberta, and
Did you know Renee is a male name as well?
Yes.
But she goes by Renee. How is that confusing?
She always goes by the
Because she
same
always
name.
goes by Renee.
But that's what I'm saying, though, is when somebody comes in and they say, my name is Jen, and they go by that name, what difference does it make?
Because you're using a different name. You're not. It's obvious it's Bob and Robert, but what if it's Flower and Stanley?
But you don't know what they used to be called. They come in, they're now an employee. We're not talking about people in the public, we're talking about employees
Aren't we
here.
right.
We're talking about employees. They come in, they apply for a job, and they say, my name is Jen.
Then they will be hired under that name. That's
Right.
their legal name.
Right.
I don't care what their name used to be.
Okay, so that's what we're talking about here.
Right. But it specifically says a court-ordered name or gender change is not required. I think we owe the public that whoever they're talking to is using a legal name, not just making up a name or changing their name one day or changing their name another day. Yes, most people probably don't do this, but it just takes one person. And we deal with the public.
Right.
What if the person signing our building documents goes by Joe one day and the next week goes by Taylor?
Right.
Okay,
you say
what
who-
name are they signing on the document? You're a builder. You've been dealing with Joe.
Right.
Next week you're dealing with Taylor. Now it's back to Joe signing the document. Well, I've been dealing with Taylor. How do you know this is the same person? Who's signing this legal document?
So how would you change these words? What would you suggest?
Well, I would obviously discuss with legal especially about what, but I think when you deal with the public, you need to be using a legal name, because even if I go by Kathy, when I sign stuff, it would be Kathleen. That's my legal name.
I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I certainly stumbled over the pronoun they. That is a tough one, but I think, yeah, I think we're kind of behind on this. I mean, I think that in, if you're downtown or in any of these bigger organizations, that they have adopted and dealt with these things. So is this language coming from the League of Minnesota Cities? Or I think we need some legal advice on this, because I think it's an area where we want to be really careful. I think to your point, I can see that. I hadn't totally thought that through, so that makes sense. But I also think from the employee's standpoint, they're going to be real sensitive on this, because it's really a tough thing for somebody to change gender. And so to have the courage to come forward and say something like that, I think we need to be supportive. So I would defer to maybe when council is here and ask.
What if somebody starts as an employee and they get married and they have a name change? I mean,
That's a legal name change.
Right, but what I'm saying is a lot of people that are gender, have changed their gender, do have legal names that are different. But I think this is written according to the current state statutes. So you can ask our attorney that, but I think what they're saying here is that whatever name they come in and they apply for, and let's say it's on their application they say Susie Jones, and that's the name that they go by, that's the name that we have to address them by, whether they're male or female. That's what this is getting at. They're not saying that they can't change their name, but they're just saying that if they prefer to be called Susie, and it happens to be a man, we identify Susie as a female name, we still have to call that individual Susie. I don't think this is saying that.
But this is saying, this doesn't say that whatever they work as, that's the name you go by. This isn't leaving out the fact that you could come into work one day after being Jasper one day and switching to Jennifer the next day. You could go back to Jasper the next week. This doesn't say you will be addressed per whatever name you're hired as until you say, I've now changed my name, here's my new legal name. It's just saying you will correspond to the employee's gender identity. There's no parameters, there's nothing. And when you deal with the public, I don't think that's right. I don't think that you just can decide one day that you're going by someone else and then decide the next day you're going by somebody else. And everyone around you at work, and including everyone in the public you have to deal with, has to go with that.
Okay, well, it would have been better if legal had been here, because, quite frankly, we could argue this for the next hour.
Right.
And we're not going to. I mean, I think there are strong convictions here. I don't think we're going to reach a conclusion tonight. So my thought process is that we table this one at least and go on to the next one until legal can come back in and help.
Well, I think the recommendation that Jasper wants is to know whether or not council is open to reviewing it with legal by the personnel committee and then bringing back the recommendations of the personnel committee to the city council.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, let's a couple questions though. Let's go through the rest and then determine whether or not, and kind of also wrap our heads around, what would the cost of that be? Because, to send this, so let's just say a phone call to the League of Minnesota Cities might determine that this is language that we have to have. Let's just say.
I don't want to hear from them. I want to hear from the hour.
I don't know why the League of Minnesota Cities would say we have to have language in it.
Otherwise, we might have to send the entire policy to our attorney, and it may cost several thousands of dollars to review this just to come back to say, yes, this is language that you need to have.
Okay.
So that's the only thing
Let's just get the quote.
Let's
get the quote from legal.
Let's go through this. Let's see what other things you may or may not want to change, and then decide after that whether we want to send it to our attorney. Okay? So next one is access to gender segregated activities and areas.
I think the whole section should be removed. I don't believe we need to address what restrooms people use in our personnel policy. As the policy is written, one person who identifies as a different gender is put above biological gender people. and that one person takes priority over everyone else. Absolutely. I used the example with Jasper originally. I'm like, what if we hire a female police officer and she's a female when she's hired, and she determines she is a male and wants to use the male's locker room now. Now the 13 male officers are uncomfortable with this. His, whatever the new pronouns would be, takes precedence over the 13 officers who've already been here. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, isn't right. And according to how this is written, you cannot ask the new officer to use a different changing area or the single stalled one. Everyone else has to use the other one. Even if there's a completely empty female changing state locker room, because using this example, we'd only have one female officer.
I think that's an excellent point. Why is it that the maybe you'll call it a bias, but why does the biological female that might be in there using a breast pump, she's got to bring her concerns to the city, and she has to move while the biological male, who now identifies as a female, wants to use that bathroom? Why does the non-biological person get privilege? Or I think that's a precedence. I mean, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. Why does the woman that can't change her sex have to use a different bathroom? I think it should be removed. And anyway, that's it.
Okay. Jeff, are you going to come into this?
Yeah, I definitely can. So, the EEOC, I don't know if everybody's familiar with them, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, takes like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and makes like modern determinations, right? And this transgender bathroom use stuff, that's related to that. So the EEOC has made this determination. The League of Minnesota Cities looks at that EEOC determination and incorporates that into the personnel policy. That's why it is the way it is. I looked this afternoon, and it still affirmed that that's the language. We can definitely have legal look at it. We'd have to update a few sections, a couple that we're not looking at. Our respectful workplace statement that we have. That's all. They're kind of all tied together. So all these things would have to be updated. So there's multiple sections of the personnel policy that would have to be looked at just so they all kind of flow together. Not saying that it couldn't. The wording, I think, in my opinion, could be changed, right? But the intent, if following the EEOC's recommendation, probably won't change much if we want to follow the EEOC's recommendations. Now, from my standpoint, like, I need to give you guidance on risk management, and I think everybody's kind of stated this probably isn't going to happen in Minnetrista. It hasn't happened to my knowledge as of yet. Could it? Sure. Is it more larger organizations? A lot of those, you're starting to see pronouns being put into email signatures and stuff like that. We're not saying we're doing any of that. That's not in our policy, but you can kind of see that how these things evolve over time. So from a risk management side, I know that LMC will say, well, there's probably been some case law and lawsuits and things like that have driven some of the recommendations that they provide us, because they're the ones representing us if there's a claim, because they have to, general liability insurance, they cover us for those things. So we can definitely go through the exercise. This is a policy decision, so it's a city council decision if we want to pursue this. From a staff perspective, we haven't run into this. We feel confident that if we do, we'll be able to come to some resolution. And if we don't, if we can't, then we'll deal with it at that time. But to me, this is more of a policy thing than an actual current challenge or issue that we have right now with the city.
Okay, but you have to elaborate. Sorry, you have to elaborate on this thing with the bathroom, because the department stores have a single bathroom, and I have yet to walk into any of those bathrooms and find somebody who looks like a man in there. Yeah, so
Anne's kind of, I think, alluding to, spoiler alert, about strategic planning, right? I think if you've looked at our CIP, we've always had something in there for ADA compliance in City Hall. If we know that we're budgeting for it, we know that this might happen. But door plungers, certain things with the bathroom height for sinks, all that stuff, something like that. If City Council chooses they want to go down the direction of single stall bathrooms, we could do that as part of that kind of exercise. We haven't done any real budget, any real estimation of cost for this type of thing. So we've kind of outlined internally what that process would look like. It'd be a facility needs study that we'd have to look at. They'd look at our facility, say, oh, we need door plungers, we need, grab bars, we need all these ADA compliant things. And then we'd be able to tie a cost to it, and then we'd be able to budget, and we'd be able to do these things. One of those things could be the single-use bathrooms. Now, in the PD, it gets a little bit more challenging because they have a locker room.
Well, let's talk about single-use bathrooms. Actually, you could have 2 or 3 rather than having 2. Now we have men, women, and there's 2 stalls in each, whatever. You could just have 3 single-use bathrooms, and they can be for anybody. I mean, male, female, who cares? I mean, a lot of stores and stuff are going to that right now.
Or you just have 1.
You might want 2 because, anyhow,
No,
depending on how many employees you have.
You just leave everything the way it is.
And get
In
one.
case you have multiple people.
Yeah, just have
for
2
things,
bathrooms.
But just have 1 bathroom
Right.
that can be
Yeah,
for people who are uncomfortable.
we'd have to get our building official involved. There's bathroom numbers, requirements based
depending on
on
how many
occupancy and
employees
stuff
and
like
yeah.
that. So we'd have to do the
Yeah,
calculation
choices
to
of
figure out what we
okay.
need.
All right.
It might be more than 3. I don't know that
gets
yet.
expensive.
But so that something like that. Now, again, like you said, at the police department, there might be some other issues. I would just be glad to get a female. I mean, come on, police officer. But I think you could put in a single dressing room or something, or you could take one of the what are they called, locker rooms, and divide it up into 2 or something, and make it gender neutral and female, male. One is gender neutral.
Chief Falls, have you run into any of this?
That's the other good question. How have other departments handled it?
Mayor and Council, that's a very good question. I know this was a topic that actually came up at the FBI Academy, but it was actually brought up by agencies in California where they dealt with this. To my understanding, all of those were very, very large agencies. So this is certainly a much more common thing in California than it is here. I'm not aware of any department in Minnesota, and that doesn't mean it isn't happening, but I'm not aware of none in the Lake area, none in the metro that I'm aware of where this has been an issue. But it's interesting that you mentioned that the priorities given to the biological, that I was not aware of. Certainly, can you make accommodations? Well, we would certainly do what we can, but that's an interesting piece of the language. I wasn't aware of that we have to upset the entire staff because somebody decides to do something different. I was not aware of that.
Well, maybe if we're going to have legal look at this, the thing is if somebody were to apply and to tell us, well, they're biologically born female, but they identify as male, we could can we then simply say, okay, that's fine, we don't have a problem with that, but we simply don't have certain facilities to accommodate certain things, and we can spell it out what we currently have. Is that an option? Because I think some of this will come as time goes by, but if somebody were to walk in, let's say tomorrow, and want to apply for one of our police openings, we probably couldn't accommodate them immediately. That's the other issue.
You have to.
But it says,
I think
it
legally you have
specifically
to.
says, however, the city will not require a transgender or gender diverse employee to use a separate non-integrated space unless requested by the transgender or gender diverse employee.
Okay.
So you couldn't say that. You can't say, okay, that's fine, but we can't accommodate this, this, and this. You're not allowed to say that. If they say they want to use the male locker room, they get to. And all the male employees, whether they're comfortable or uncomfortable with it, would then have to find somewhere else.
But then
to
you
go.
can't also say you can't use it. You have to use the singular one. So, in other words,
Well, that point's good
Yeah.
too. It's a good point. That's also
Yeah.
too, and that's gone through my mind a number of
Yeah.
times. Just because you have a single doesn't mean that
they have to use it,
they
right?
have to use it.
Right.
One would hope there'd be some reasonableness, right, when we attempt to accommodate, because, I mean, you could run into a situation where you have 13 officers in a male locker room and one person who disrupts the whole thing. Well, now we have 13 officers. We have to figure out where they're going to use a locker room, technically, per the language. Now, we hope there's some reasonableness, right, like with the person, right, because that would be very disruptive to everybody.
Well,
You know?
potentially, absolutely. I'm not going to upset an entire department over one person. That doesn't, legally, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. But so I would be curious to see what legal says, because I can tell you that staff would have a huge issue with that, current staff.
Isn't it important, though, to have something in writing so that if there is a problem, first off, staff has guidance as to how they should deal with it, and secondly, for insurance liability, that yeah, we do have a policy, here it is, but if we're just kind of going along, that I think would be bad for us in court. So
That's an excellent point.
isn't that a big part of why
It
this
is. It's risk management, and I mean, really, they say consult with your city attorney, but it's all kind of, in my opinion, kind of tied together. Like our city attorney will lean on the league because they're our insurance provider who will be the one defending us. Our city attorney won't be defending us in a court of law. It'll be the League of Minnesota Cities. So if we get sued, if somebody files a claim against us, so they'll lean on that because they're the ones actually defending us. So it's kind of this circular kind of loop that we're kind of talking about, where we'll get Mary Teachin, who's our HR attorney, her input, but she's going to rely on the league guidance.
And I hate to put this out there, but from all we've just said tonight, what's going to happen is when that person applies for a job, they're not going to get hired. That's what's going to happen. I mean, and that's even worse.
But what if they're already hired
Well, that's
and then change?
well, that's different. I mean, okay, so that doesn't come into this, but I mean, that's words not onus. We're putting on restrictions in the language that keep us from doing what's right by the person, no matter what the sex. And so there does have to be some sort of wording change in this. There has to be. Otherwise, everybody gets hurt, including that person. Okay. I want to hear a legal quote as to review.
Yeah, and I can do that. So one thing that we have to look at our own EEO statement, equal what's it? Employment opportunity, employer opportunity, equal employment opportunity, EEO statement, and then our respectful workplace, and then any language that is tied to those. These two things that we just talked about are tied to our statements. So we can talk to Mary and see what she has to say.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
And then we can bring that back. Would that be if? So get a number, bring it back to a future work session. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
And then go from there. And if we want to move forward with having the personnel committee work with our legal to develop potentially some different language, we can do that.
I mean, do we want to do it as a 3-step process, or do we want to talk to Mary Teachin and see what she says, and then just bring it? I mean, we're only talking about a few paragraphs, so would we just want to bring it back to council at a work session?
We could bring Mary. So sorry.
Yeah.
We could bring Mary into a work session too, where some of these
Right.
questions could be fleshed
That's what
out.
I think we would have to do.
Yeah, that would be.
And then if we're going to actually do a more robust update after that, then she could develop a quote if that's where we want to go. She could maybe get a range at that time. So
Okay.
probably
All right.
looking, end of February, March-ish, I'm guessing, just with
Yeah.
our schedule.
Yep.
Okay.
And a little question on the next paragraph. I just wanted to make sure I understood. It sounds like it says that employees can bring firearms to work, but they have to leave them in their car and it has to be locked. Is that how you read that? Because I kind of went through it and I'm like, I can't
So there's certain state statutes about bringing firearms into City Hall, and then I think we can also, as a city, establish some of our own rules, if you will. So state statute, believe it or not, does not prohibit, we cannot tell people, the public, that they can't come into the council chambers with a gun. So they can come into the council, this is my understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong, Chief. They can come in here with a gun. So if they have a permit to carry, they can come in here with their gun. You could carry a gun into council chambers if you have a permit to carry. What you can't do is you can't go into the offices, and nor can the public go into the offices with any firearms. Is that the way you understand that?
I believe there are some rules that specifically spell out where you can and can't to permit holders. Mm-hmm. And that would not include licensed police officers are kind of exempt, certainly.
Kind of. I think they are exempt.
On duty, but even off duty, they're allowed to carry in a lot more places,
right.
which is a good thing.
The personnel policy does only refer to city employees.
Right.
Well, and this seems to indicate that they have to keep them put away.
In their
It says
vehicle.
locked unattended personal vehicle while they're working on city property. So
Correct.
so if they had a permit and they left it in their car, that's what they should do. They
Right.
shouldn't
Correct.
bring it in.
And for the record, I'd like to state that's not a good idea. Most
Right.
firearms that are stolen from vehicles. So I certainly wouldn't recommend that to anybody. If you can't carry it, leave it at home, locked up properly.
So do you think you want to change that? Just say it's not permitted on city property? Employees cannot have.
I would.
I think
I'd just leave it.
Oh,
I think
okay.
the intent originally.
It's not
stemmed
doing
from,
any
like,
harm being
hunting,
there, I don't think.
Like hunting weapons for people who go to work and then leave to go
Right.
hunting, who have their
Oh,
rifles in their cars for that. I think that's where the original intent of it was.
Sure.
Versus someone who has a handgun and just keeps it in their
Oh,
car
okay.
type thing.
Okay,
It's more
thank
for
you.
people who go hunting.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Okay, I was just curious.
Okay, anything else on this? So we'll bring this back with Mary Teachin at a work session sometime in February, beginning of March-ish, depending on.
We'll talk to Mary and see what her schedule allows.
Sounds good.
And we only have one meeting in March, correct?
Right.
That is correct.
Yep. Unless you want to add another one. I don't think we do, right? All right. So with that, then we can be adjourned. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Ms. Claudia. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. All those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes.